Okay, folks, we're about to begin. Yes, I am recording. I said it already, and it's ready to roll. So, okay. There is a very, very important teaching that I would like to actually share it with you. I'd like to be able to read it for yourself. So I'm going to put it up on the screen, and then I will share, and you'll be able to see it for yourselves. It's not the whole thing, it's most of it. This is in a book called Hayom Yom. What's Hayom Yom? Hayom Yom was written by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, that's Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, the Grand Rabbi, the Rebbe. Grand Rabbi Rebbe means basically the same thing, of the Chabad Lubavitch movement, who passed away some years ago. In any event, he wrote a sort of a daily diary of the teachings of the Rebbe who preceded him, who was his father-in-law. And he took some of the teachings and sort of distilled them into a bite-sized idea for the purposes of giving someone something to think about that day. So this was from a couple of days ago, 3 days ago exactly, the 16th of Elul. Today was the 19th, we're already in the 20th actually, because the day begins at night in the Jewish calendar, not at midnight, but at when the stars come out. So it's already the 20th of Elul, so it was 4 days ago, technically speaking. In any event, very, very important idea over here, extremely important idea, and that is that one must perceive a person as he stands, as he or she. It's obviously not meant only as only for a man. One must perceive a person as he or she stands in the primordial thought of Adam Kadmon. Now I'll explain all of these things shortly. Let's just read it through. There each soul stands with all the generations destined to descend from it, from that soul, until the coming of Mashiach, until the coming of the Messiah, the righteous Redeemer. When one does a favor to an individual, it is a favor to all those souls until the end of all generations. When you do a favor to that one person, all the souls that are contained within his or her soul are all recipients of that same favor. Now, favor is a terrible word, actually. It's really not a proper translation of the word in Hebrew, which is tova. Tova means you do good for somebody. It's not just you do them a favor. Do them a favor, yeah, I'll lend you my car. That's a favor. But this means a favor, and when we say lasot tova, when you're doing a favor for somebody, it's more than just sort of a cursory help them out for a minute. It is bestowing goodness upon them. And this is something that we will discuss and understand in greater depth shortly. Now, there's a background to this particular quote, as in fact there is to all the quotes in Hayom Yom. He quotes from either a discourse of his father-in-law or from a letter. In this particular case, it happens to be a letter that the previous Rebbe wrote. And there's a story behind the letter, or story in the letter. What is the story? The story begins like this. The founder of the Chabad movement, of the Chabad Lubavitch movement, his name was Rabbi Shneir Zalman of Liadi. Rabbi Shneir Zalman of Liadi, which is in Russia, White Russia, I believe. In any event, he established a house of study, a yeshiva, and the yeshivas, the houses of studies in those days was much more comprehensive than just like a school. It wasn't just a school, a high school or something like that. It had classes extending from fairly young men to people who could be, middle-aged. And when he established this yeshiva, so there were students in the yeshiva, and yeshiva is this academy, like basically this academy for Torah study. And when the Alter Rebbe, when Rabbi Shneur Zalman, called the Alter Rebbe the Old Rebbe, and because he was the first one in the lineage of Chabad Hasidim, Chabad Lubavitch. Chabad is the system. Lubavitch was just the name of the town where they came from in White Russia. So when Rabbi Shneur Zalman established this yeshiva, so he had a son, and he put his son in charge of the young, in charge of the young married men who were part of this yeshiva, part of this academy called the Avrechim. He put him in charge of them, and the son's name, Rabbi Shneur Zalman's son's name was Rabbi Dov Ber of Lubavitch. So he threw himself heart and soul into instructing and educating these young people, these young men. This was a men's yeshiva, by the way. In Jewish tradition in general, anything beyond sort of grade school, the genders or the sexes are separated. Males and females are separated into different classes. Not only different classes, but in fact different schools, because there need to be different. There ought to be different approaches for males and females. Not to get into it now because it's not part of the story, but just to give you some context and some background. So when Rabbi Shneur Zalman put his son in charge of the young men, this young Dovber threw himself into the work, absolutely heart and soul, and he dedicated himself day and night to the work. To the extent that he wasn't a strong person, he wasn't strong physically, very strong mentally and spiritually, and in that kind of way, but physically he was on the weaker side. And when he would speak to the students, he would speak really from the heart, and he would put everything that he could into those students. Now, this caused him to be very, very weak, to become very weak at a certain point in time. And he was unable to do his duty for a couple of days. So some of the older Hasidim, some of the older followers of Rabbi Shneur Zalman Uliadi wanted to come to the rabbi, to the Rebbe, to Rabbi Shneur Zalman, to the Alter Rebbe, to express their concern for his son, that he was working much too hard and putting far too much effort into it. And perhaps he should tone it down a little bit and not drive himself to the point of illness. So when they came to talk to the Alter Rebbe, he listened to them. This was the answer that they got. The answer actually came from from Rabbi Dov Ber himself. He said to these older Hasidim that, I appreciate the fact that you're concerned about my health and so on and so forth, but when my father gave me the duties, the responsibilities of taking care of these young men and guiding them in their spiritual path, you should know that when you look at another person, you have to look at them in their highest possible soul root. He said you have to look at them as they stand in machshava hakaduma da'ak, which we translated here as one must perceive a person as he stands in the primordial thought of Adam Kadmon. That's how you have to see another person. Now, let me unpack this for you a little bit, and then we will read some more of this letter that the previous Rebbe is discussing. So here, let me just get this up on the screen. Here we're talking about the various soul levels. and the worlds which correspond to them. And you could say that soul levels are certain levels of consciousness as well, levels of consciousness. And why it's doing this, I don't really know, but yeah, okay, consciousness, yeah, so levels of consciousness as well. Okay, so the soul level, as we know, and we've spoken about on many, many occasions, there are 5 names which are given to the soul. The Arizal, Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, the famous Kabbalist, the father of modern Kabbalah, tells us that these 5 names are not just 5 interchangeable names, but each name of the soul is designated for a particular level of soul, which corresponds to a certain world. So the level of nefesh, that's the lowest level of soul, is what you might call physical consciousness. It's the consciousness that we receive, the consciousness that we build through our sense perceptions. And it corresponds in Kabbalah to the world of Asiyah, which is the lowest of the worlds. So physical consciousness, Asiyah, Nefesh, are all basically on the same plane. The Nefesh, the consciousness of the Nefesh, is the world of Asiyah. The consciousness of Ruach, which is a level higher up, one level up, is emotional consciousness, and that is the world of Yetzirah. Now, when I say that emotional consciousness in the world of Yetzirah, all of the Sfirot are in all of the worlds. Asiya, Yetzirah, Bria, Tzilut, Adam Kadmon, all of them have the 10 Sfirot. However, which Sfirot are dominant in the world of Asiya? In the world of Asiya, the Sfirah that's dominant is Malchut. In the world of Yetzirah, the Sfirot that are dominant are the 6 emotional Sfirot from Chesed to Yesod. From Chesed to Yesod. I'm sure all of you have seen various charts and maps of the Sfirot. Is there anyone that would like to see a chart of the Sfirot now, or are you okay? Do you know where we are? Let me just get it over here. I'll get it up anyway. There you go. Yeah. So the world of Asiya corresponds to Malchut, the lowest of the lowest world corresponds to the lowest Sfira. Then the world of Yetzirah corresponds to these over here, these 6 Sfirot. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod. If I reduce it a little bit, then you'll be able to see the whole picture. There we go. I hope that's clear, yeah? You can see it? All right. Okay, that's those are the 6 Sfirot over there, right? The world of Bria corresponds to the Sfira of Bina over here. Dot actually doesn't count in this particular, from above to below, dot doesn't count. From below to above, dot does count. And then there's Chochma, corresponds to the world of Atzilut, and Keter will correspond to the world of Adam Kadmon, as we will see. Now, 1 second, there was a question. Ruach is Zeranpin, yes. Ruach is Zeranpin, exactly. Okay, so we were saying, let me just get back to this. Oops, wrong one. We'll look at that one in a minute. We were saying that here, the world of Nefesh corresponds to Asiya, and that would be Malchut. Ruach corresponds to Yetzirah, and Ruach would be the 6 Sfirot, the emotional consciousness, the 6 Sfirot of the emotional Sfirot, Chesed to Yesod, Zer Anpin, as Shane pointed out. Neshama corresponds to Bria, that's intellectual consciousness, that would be Bina. Chaya is purpose consciousness, corresponds to the world of Atzilut, and that is the Sfira of Chochma. And Yechida was the very, very highest level of the soul, which could be called God consciousness, corresponds to Adam Kadmon and to Keter. Adam Kadmon is the highest of all the worlds. So again, the worlds are Asiya, Yetzirah, Bria, Atzilut, Adam Kadmon. In all of the worlds, you have all of the Sfirot. in different forms, that's for sure. The Sfirot in the world of Asiya are much more materialized than the Sfirot of the world of Atzilut, but nevertheless, the same paradigm repeats itself in all of the worlds. Now, the highest immanent Sfira in Adam Kadmon, even though Adam Kadmon itself is not an immanent world, it's a meta world, it's a transcendent world, but the highest, so to speak, immanent Sfira, in other words, not the Keter of Adam Kadmon, but the Chokhmah of Adam Kadmon, is called Chokhmah, and the inner dimension of that Chokhmah is called Chokhmah Keduma. Chokhmah Keduma, the primordial thought, Chokhmah Keduma. Let's just change that a little bit and call it Chokhmah Keduma, which is what he actually calls it in the original. Chokhmah Keduma. Chokhmah HaKeduma, actually. The Chokhmah Keduma of Adam Kadmon. So we're talking about the primordial thought of Adam Kadmon. That's the plan, that's the map, that's the purpose of all of creation is contained there. And that, he says, when you look at another person, that's how you have to look at them. You have to look at them in their absolute first soul root. That's who they are. That is who they are. They're not what you see down here necessarily, unless the person is a tzaddik, unless the yechida of his neshama, the yechida of his soul, is shining so powerfully that it illuminates his physical presence as well. Most people, it's not like that. But that's the reality, that's the truth. And that's really how we have to look at other people. We have to look at them from their original primordial thought, as it is in Adam Kadmon, the first manifestation of any type of world. In other words, the entire purpose of creation is contained over there. And that is how you have to look at the person in terms of his or her role in sustaining and manifesting, in sustaining creation and manifesting godliness in the world. Okay, any questions so far? I would like to analyze this a little bit more and just look at the concept of souls and worlds a little bit more in detail, in a more practical sense. I didn't really bring this here. I didn't bring this previously, but I would like you to have a look at this idea now. Again, we said that Nefesh corresponds to the world of Asiya, the world of action. What are the activities that take place in the world of action? Dennis, you're asking a very, very good question, and that essentially is the, yes, that's exactly correct. You see him as the child of God. I'm going to get to that in a minute, because that's exactly what the previous Rebbe actually said, what he actually wrote, rather, in his letter, and we're going to get to that shortly. Very insightful of you, and we're going to get there shortly. Okay, so the activities of the world of Asiya, if you can call them activities per se, but the activities of the world of Asiya is acknowledgement of the presence of God, of the plan of God, acceptance and fulfillment of the practical commandments. That's Malchut. Fulfillment of the practical commandments, acknowledgement, acceptance, etc. The world of Asiya. The world of Yetzirah, as we said before, was the emotional awakening of a person, the dawning of a person's love for God and love for his fellow human being. The world of Bria, corresponding to Neshama and Bria, is the world of meditation and comprehension, which is called Hitbonenut and Hasaga, Bina. Hitbonenut means meditation. The world of Atzilut, the activity of the world of Atzilut would be called Dveikut. Dveikut means literally being stuck to God, cleaving to God in such a way that you lose your own being. Now, losing your own being in this way is actually finding your being. It's not losing it, it's actually finding it, because it's finding your higher self within godliness. And then, but cleaving is nevertheless when two entities are stuck together, they form one entity, yes, but they're still two things stuck together. The highest level is the world of Yechida, where the activity, so to speak, is oneness and total self-nullification. You aren't even there. It's called in Hebrew and in Hasidic terminology, it's called bittul b'metziut, existential nullification. Bittul b'metziut. And that corresponds to the Sphira of Keter. Okay, so far? Good. All right. Let us go back to the first diagram, which was, no, it was not that one. It was, where is it exactly now? What's this? The first, this quote from Hayom Yom. So let's finish it off. One a specific person is, it stands in the primordial thought, Chochmah HaKaduma of Adam Kadmon. There, each soul, each and every soul stands with all the generations destined to descend from it until the coming Mashiach. Now, I don't intend to get political over here. As you know, we don't cover politics in any of these classes. I may have political opinions, and some people will tell you that I do, like Yael maybe. Yael, right? I do have some political opinions in some areas, but this is what I'm about to say is not political. What I'm about to say is just simply the truth. Just think about the concept of, unfortunately, the concept of what happens when a person, when a woman has an elective abortion. Unfortunately, this whole concept of all the generations destined to descend from that soul are just not going to happen. It's a very unfortunate thing. Now, when I say an elective abortion, that means an abortion where the child will be sort of inconvenient. Of course, if there's some major medical issue and the doctors determine that the woman's life is in danger, then there's no question in Jewish law that you have to have an abortion. No question about it. I just saw a beautiful video the other day that somebody sent me of a woman who had been trying to get pregnant for many years, and she had never, with all kinds of drugs and treatments and so on and so forth, and it never happened. Unfortunately, one day she got pregnant. And wouldn't you know it, she got measles. Somehow or another, she was traveling somewhere, or whatever it is, she got ill. And the doctors told her, you've got to abort the baby's going to be deaf, or it's going to whatever, the measles are going to affect the baby, and you have to. So she said, I've been trying for all these years. I finally get pregnant, and I'm not in any way going to dump this baby. And she had the baby, a beautiful little girl who sees and hears, and everything is absolutely fine. Anyway, just a nice little story, by the way. So, all of the generations are there in potential in that particular soul. And when one does a favor to that individual, you're not only doing a favor, you're not only doing goodness for that particular person, but for all the generations that will come out of that person until the end of time, essentially, right? It's a favor to all of those souls until the end of all generations, the end of time. Okay, that was the section from Hayom Yom, but this was a quote from actually a longer letter, as I mentioned. The previous Rebbe, in his letter, says, I learned 4 things from the statement of Rabbi Dov Ber, the son of Rabbi Shneur Zalman. He said, I learned 4 things. Now, these, it's unfortunately, we're not going to have time to get into everything in the depth that it deserves, but at least we'll go through whatever we can, at least superficially. Each one of these is a lesson, and more than one lesson on its own. So, in any event, as Dennis already pointed out to us, Dennis being a very spiritual person himself already The word in Yiddish is gehabt. Yeah, he understood it without having to be told. He grasped the idea. The previous Rebbe says as follows. The Rebbe Rayatz, we're going to call him, because to call him previous is not quite correct, but every soul continues to exist. So the Rebbe Rayatz, his name is Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, so they call him Rayatz for short. So he says like this, the Rayatz says as follows. The soul, the way it is in Machshava HaGeduma, that we just explained, is on the level of Ben, a child. This is the child of God. And when it comes down to be clothed within a physical body, then that soul is on the level of a servant. So the soul in its source is a child. In Machshava HaGeduma, the soul is God's child. When it's clothed within the body, it is a servant. A servant to God. Almost, you could say, you could use the word slave, although slave has such bad connotations, perhaps we shouldn't use it. But a slave in the sense of what is our work when we're down here? It is to serve, and our work up there is to be the child of God and to follow what that means. In other words, what's the difference between a child and a servant? A servant has to wait to be told what to do, and he does. He follows orders, and he follows them precisely and fully, and does the very best that he can. A child does not necessarily have to wait for orders. A child knows what it is that his parent wants, and the greatest honor for a child, we're talking about children the way they should be, right? The children that we wish we all had. Okay, I'm not complaining about my children in any way. I love them all dearly. I'm just talking about the image of, the Mittler Rebbe was one of those kind of children. This particular Rabbi Dorper was one of those kind of children. He didn't have to wait for his father to tell him he understood already. And he was dedicated completely to his father's duties in the world. In any way that he could help him and further that mission, duties is the wrong word, mission, and further that mission in the world, he dedicated himself, he devoted himself to it absolutely. So that's the first thing. Okay. The second thing, the soul as it is in Machshava HaKeduma, in this primordial thought of Adam Kadmon, has intense soul powers that are able to be motivated is the wrong word, energized, I suppose you could say, and affect what's going on down here in this world, in the work of refining and elevating the sparks of holiness which are embedded within creation. After the breaking of the vessels of the world of Tohu, which is a subject that I just finished dealing with in the next course, by the way, for those of you who are interested. The next course is available on Teachable, teachable.kabbalah-decoded.com. Course 3 is just done, and here the Arizal speaks. It's about the Ramak, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, and the Arizal and their teachings. So he speaks a lot about the work of Birurim, refining and elevating the sparks of holiness that fell down into Kedusha, and fell down into the worlds, into Klippa, essentially, into impurity, spiritual impurity. So when the soul comes down below, it is given special powers to be able to do this work of extracting and elevating the sparks of holiness that it comes into contact with during its life in this world. When, as the soul is on the level of son, of child, son or daughter, it is not able to do that kind of work. That's only there in potential, because it doesn't come into contact with the sparks of holiness embedded in the lower levels of creation. That is the second thing. Here's the third one. not only is the soul there in the original thought of Adam Kadmon, but it's there with everything that soul will produce in future generations. And all that includes all of the possibilities of refining sparks and doing and elevating the world around it. And all of that is contained in potential in the soul as it is in Machshov Hakduma Da'ak, in the original thought of the primordial thought of Adam Kadmon. Everything is contained there. Now, all of that we've said, more or less, when we read from this, from the short quote. But here's something that perhaps was not clearly articulated in that particular quote, and it's this: the soul as it is in the primordial thought, the Machshava Hakduma of Adam Kadmon, it itself, when the soul looks at itself, when the person looks at themselves, they have to look at themselves in the same way that they look at other people. Let me just switch the screen again and show you what I mean here. When we said over here, one must perceive a person as he stands in the primordial thought of Adam Kadmon, it's not only another person you should perceive that way, it's yourself that you have to perceive that way as well. It's not only other people. You have to realize that your soul is on that level. Now, let's just think for a minute. What kind of educational point is being made over here? In my opinion, this is not just fascinating, but absolutely vital that everybody has to know. Yes, true, we all have our blemishes. We all have things that we could certainly do better in. We lack in this, we lack in that. We're not so good at this, we're not so good at that. Doesn't matter. The origin of the soul is Machshova Hakduma of Ak, the original primordial thought of Adam Kadmon. That's our origin. Therefore, when we look at ourselves, we look at what we can become, at what we can manifest in ourselves. Not what we are, but what we can become. Because what we are is only a temporary thing. What we are right now, we're not going to be in another split second from now. We're going to already be somewhat different. And another split second from then, we'll be different again. So what we are in terms of the present is not nearly as important, as the idea that we have this image of ourselves in a state of absolute perfection to look up to and to work towards. Now, when I say to work towards, it doesn't mean that we're going to get there in 5 minutes. It doesn't mean we're ever going to get there even in this lifetime. It doesn't matter. Not very, 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 very few people actually get to that level. The greatest saints get to that level. The greatest prophets get to that level. But at least we know the direction that we should be moving in. And Elisheva says it absolutely correctly over here. We say in our morning blessings every morning, it's one of the things that we say, is as follows: Neshama shenatata bi tahorahi. The soul that you put into me, tahorahi, it is pure. The soul that you put into me is pure. And therefore, since that soul is pure, I have the ability to use the powers of my pure soul to illuminate my own world, myself, my little 4 cubits, and beyond my 4 cubits, the world around me to whatever extent I can. That is the teaching that Rabbi Dov Ber presents us with. When he says, love thy neighbor as a self, this is the part of neighbor and self they are talking about. Yes, absolutely. Okay. Now, as a result, of course, we have this duty, therefore, to spread out the light to ourselves and to others. And we all together increase the light in the world so that while we are attempting to bring this to those people who are technically speaking below us, in other words, our generations, the generations that stem from us, at the same time, we're receiving that same thing, that same goal, that same image of our highest selves from the previous generation. So everyone should be involved in spreading that message further. We're getting it from the previous generations, we're passing it on to the next generation. Instead of passing on to the next generation, the concept of the me generation, let's at least pass on the us, the us principle. It's not just me, it's us. It's all we're all in this together. We're all trying to make the world a better place. And if we do this in a symbiotic way, in other words, you help me, I help you, and we help a third person together, then the world is consequently a much better place. Now, this comment is true, but, and I'll get to the but in a minute. This is the comment. But we cannot know where we are. We can never truly look at ourselves fully objectively, only subjectively. Yes, maybe first we have to figure out where are you? Yes, Ayeka. In fact, there's a famous Hasidic story that actually encapsulates this. Is exactly the term Ayeka. Where are you? When I forget the details of the story now, but it's also a story of the Alter Rebbe, and he said, Ayeka, figure out where you are. Figure out where you are. Ayeka, where are you? You have to first figure out where you are. You're right. You have to figure out where you are. Where are you holding? But the way very often people figure out where they're holding is they look in the mirror. Okay, look in the mirror. It's a reasonable thing to do. But if you're only looking in the mirror, you're only looking at your parallel self. You're not looking at your higher self. You're not looking at what you can become. And we all know, it's true, we might not know ultimately how we look in the divine image in Machshava HaKaduma Da'ak, in the primordial thought of Adam Kadmon. Maybe we aren't aware of that. For sure we aren't aware of that. But nevertheless, we know for sure what can advance us a little more along the road. I understand where you're coming from in this question here. You're coming from, I assume, let's not get sort of carried away. We're not angels, and we're not like all up there, and we have to figure out what's going on down there. Yes, it's true. But we all do know what we could do one thing a little bit better. We don't have to do everything perfectly, at least certainly not initially. It's a good goal to have, yes, but it doesn't work. What we have to do is incremental improvement. Incremental improvement eventually gets us to the goal. Whether in this lifetime or another lifetime is not the issue. The incremental improvement on a daily basis, you'd be amazed how far we can get by just small incremental improvements in our behavior, in our attitudes, in our the way we look at ourselves, the way we look at other people, and so on and so forth. Baby steps, exactly baby steps. So Yal asks, in the level of Adam Kadmon, the soul is made aware of its duties throughout its physical lifetime. Does it come with all the necessary tools? Please explain the soul of the convert, or let's look at the soul of Abraham. Yes, it comes with all the necessary tools. Those tools are presented in various opportunities which present themselves in life. And sometimes those opportunities we can overlook them, not sometimes, but very easily. My wife was just telling me a story that I think she read, about a boy who was from a very abusive family, and he was taken away from that family, and then he was given, his parents actually, both of them eventually died from drug overdoses, and he was brought up in foster homes. But he was a very troubled kid, as you can imagine. He'd been very physically abused and all kinds of things as a child, and he was a very rough character. His foster parents sent him to school. He made he made other students in the school's life miserable until he was expelled. The next school he went to, he just most of the time he was playing hooky. He didn't even go to school. His parents weren't aware of it, until eventually they found out, and eventually the adopted parents gave him up, and he went through several adopted parents until he got to a certain set of parents. And this is like he was going through a set of parents a year, basically. And you can imagine what kind of kid this was. Eventually, he got to this, and the person who's actually telling the story is this kid himself when he eventually became an adult. And he says, my adopted father, my adoptive father and mother, my foster parents, he said he was like a huge guy. He was huge. He was 6'3", and very powerful, and very, he was also quite large. He said he looked like a lowercase b, put it that way. Big stomach and the whole thing. But anyway, he said he was such a wonderful person that I played my usual games and tried to get them to reject me and to throw me out, because that's the way I thought. And one day my adopted father took me aside, and he said, look, we don't see you as a problem. We see you as a challenge. And he said that was a completely new approach to him, and he started thinking about it, and it completely turned him around. And today he's a very responsible citizen, doing very good work and doing things and helping out people and so on and so forth. But in any event, the point being that we do have the necessary tools. Yes, someone has to sometimes reveal the tools to us. We don't always see them. This boy saw those tools suddenly and in a very kind of unexpected way. Now, when you talk about the soul of the convert, that's an interesting question. The Zohar, and in fact the Talmud as well, when they speak about the convert, they talk about the convert as, now, just be aware that Judaism does not try and make converts. In fact, if someone wants to convert, they're discouraged from doing so initially. Why? Because it's an upheaval in your life. It's, family issues and so on and so forth. Think twice, and maybe even 3 times before a person converts. So we don't run after converts, but the Talmud and the Zohar, when they speak about a convert, speak about the original, the language is a ger shenidgayer, a convert who converts. So the commentaries ask the question, the obvious question, why do you say a convert who converts? You should say a Gentile who converts, or a non-Jew who converts to Judaism. So the answer that's given in Kabbalah, in particular, the Zohar, is that this soul is already the soul. It's a Jewish soul which became captive in the 3 impure klipot, when after the sin of Adam and so on and so forth, it became involved in impurity, and it's a captive soul. So therefore, anyone who has the desire to the sincere desire to become Jewish should know that most probably, that soul was the soul of a Jew in the first place. One of my teachers, when I was in yeshiva, when I was in seminary in Israel, one of my teachers, who I'm very close with today still, is a Ger Tzedek. He's a convert to Judaism. very, very fine person with tremendous insight and sense of humor. Was wonderful. Really an extremely special person. Okay. And those converts, where did they come from? They came from the soul of Abraham and Sarah. That's where they came from. Et hanefesh asher asu b'charan. They were the ones that made those souls. Okay. We do not spend enough time examining where are you. We are on a fast train on the way we think we want to be. We think we want to be, but do we really know what we really know if we do not slow down? Yeah, you're right. We have to slow down. It's true. That's what meditation is all about, slowing down the thought process. We want to act, we want to move. Yeah. Now, it can be sometimes that, too much meditation is also a problem in the sense that it gets you away from doing things, from action. I'll think about it basically. Let me think about it for a couple of years or a couple of decades before I actually do anything. That's not going to work. The contemplation has to come out of the action. Then it's real, true contemplation. What I mean is is this: when a person contemplates in order to know how to act, then the contemplation is a valid contemplation. That's valid meditation. If the meditation is simply all in theory and it doesn't have any practical significance, then there's a question whether that is real. We get caught up on labels: liberal, conservative, right, left, reform, orthodox, convert, non-convert, because it's about how close. It is all about how close an individual can cleave to God. You're right. I would agree with that. I would agree that it's very, that's the ultimate goal, is for the soul to cleave to God, but for that to filter through to all levels of the soul, including the soul within the body, so that the person's actions follow the divine image of what the person should be in this world. Okay, folks, I think that is going to be it for tonight. Next week, I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to do a class. We'll see. I'll let you know. In any event, let me just, a message from our sponsor. A message from our sponsor. Take a look at the course on Teachable. We're now on the third course, teachable.Kabbalah decoded, Kabbalah decoded -.com. And perhaps someone will want to join us there and get through the essentials of Kabbalah, all the way from beginning to the most advanced ideas and concepts in the Arizal and eventually in the Baal Shem Tov, which I haven't done the course of the Baal Shem Tov yet, and then just concepts and ideas that will be discussed in the fifth class. Alrighty, good night, everybody. All the best, and I hope I'll see you next week, but I'm not sure. I'll let you know. Alrighty. Have a good sweet year if I don't see you before then. And Alan, you're welcome. And we have to get to chat at some point in time. Yes? Alrighty. All the best then. Bye now.